welcome Alicia.
So I don't like PowerPoints nor microphones, so I've got both, which the PowerPoint is 8 slides. It will be nowhere on any thing for you to download because it's absolutely ridiculous. I hate it. I deleted it 4 times while making it, so this is as good as it's going to get. The handouts, though, you should have 3 handouts. These I will get to POSAP to put up. These are more like guidelines for you, and they can, if you guys take them, then you guys can rework them to your building, add things. They're definitely not all encompassing. Does everybody have them? No, Perry, you don't have them, do you? Okay. So basically some back history on re-entry meetings and why I kind of looked into it and why we're doing it at the school that I'm at now. So probably about 3 to 4 years ago, we were having a rash of kids come in from mental health placements. Not so much from drug and alcohol, but from mental health placements. And they were just showing up. Like, we would have no idea that they were discharged. We would have no idea that they were in the building. They just came back and went right back into their own schedule. And midway through the day, we would get something from a teacher that would say, hey, did you know Jane's back and she hasn't been in school in 2 weeks and she just showed up? And we were like, no, we had no idea Jane was in the building. And then probably like right after lunch, we would get another email that Jane had broken down and was overwhelmed and upset. And now we were rushing her down to guidance or somewhere and talking to her, and she wasn't prepared to be back. She wasn't prepared for the questions she was being asked, and it was a disaster. And we had no discharge summary. We had no idea if she was on medication. We had no idea if her medication changed. We didn't know anything. And it was really, truly a disservice. Like, it was just bad. And so we decided, and we did it a little bit differently than I'm going to eventually explain it to you. We decided that we had to do something. Like, we had to put a stop to this. We couldn't just have kids coming back into our buildings without knowing about it. So the first year, we just kind of made a pact that any time our guidance secretary saw anybody out for more than like 2 to 3 days, our school counselors were going to give the parents a call. And we were going to be nosy. We were just going to like call and say, hey, we noticed they're out. We just wondering, like, are they just sick or are they somewhere? Do we need to contact somebody? And we kind of, for the first year, did it that way. And we caught some, and some we didn't catch. And some we were able to have a meeting before they came back, and some we weren't. And we went into the summer, and we decided that we were going to make it more of a formal effort the next year. And so for the last 2 years, we just were on top of it. Anytime someone was out, we made it a policy. At back to school night, we talked about how we wanted to have reentries with everybody that was out for a mental health placement or a drug or alcohol placement. We sent Connect Ed emails in the beginning of the year and said, this is not a requirement, but this is highly recommended that if your student is out for a mental health placement or a drug or alcohol placement, could you please call us ahead of time and let us know so that we can get stuff in place. And so we did that the last 2 years. And then this year we actually put guidelines in, and we put administrative guidelines in. So that's kind of the history of it. Since us making those Connect Ed phone calls, and now this, I maybe have 1 a year that we don't catch. We have a re-entry meeting pretty much for every student in the high school, so I'm talking 9th through 12th, that is out at a placement, a mental health placement or a drug or alcohol placement, okay? So that's kind of like the history of it and where we're at with it. So what you need to start with, to get started though, and really to do it properly, is to really sit down and talk with your administrators, your school counselors, and your school nurses. So you really need to have an informal meeting with all of them at the building and say, this is why I think reentry meetings would be a good idea. What do you guys think about it? Would you be willing to enforce it? Would you be willing to send a ConnectEd email out or something out to let parents know that we want to start this process, we want to start looking at it? And in those emails and those initial meetings, we talk about all the benefits to the student for having a reentry meeting. So, we can look at their schedules. Maybe their schedules are overwhelming when they come back. We can look at, does stuff need to be changed before they get in? Is their schoolwork completed? What can be missed or no counted? What needs to be done? Can we do a calendar of what needs to be done academically? So when they come back in, it's actually spread out and it's not like you have to finish all this in day 1 and 2 that you're back. So we hit more of the academic stuff and the benefits to talking to us and getting us to have a reentry meeting. And then we also put in some of the social and emotional welfare benefits as well. But the academics seem to engage the parents more so than when we talked about the social and emotional concerns. Or the well-beings or what benefits they would get from that. Okay. We also had our SAP liaison at those initial meetings and said, what is your time frame? So if you have a SAP liaison at your building that is only there maybe once a week or once every other week, their time to attend reentry meetings could be non-existent. They might not be able to be there. So you really need to include that specialist and say, when could you be there? Is this something that you want to get on board with? Could you help us with it? Can we pull you in for some of the initial ones? So that's something to think about as well. Okay. Any questions so far? Is anybody in here doing any reentry meetings as of now? You guys are and you three are definitely? Definitely. Okay, good. So, and do you have guidelines and stuff in place?
Yeah, we have our guidelines. We have our checklist that we give to the parents. We have the parents sign that.
Okay.
So say if a student identifies that they're having suicidal ideation, our policy is the student has to get checked out. Can't return without a clearance note from the doctor. But at that point, when I'm bringing the parent in, just to sort of, obviously tell them what's going on, that's when we sort of give them the forms and stuff like that.
And all this stuff.
Sign the forms, if that's the way it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they'll contact us and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And what about back there?
We have a whole system protocol that we work on. So parents and students who sign the agreement and not agreement, we have a relationship where we have a contract with our local mental health provider. We check in. Staff review a baseline of functioning so that we can see if there are any issues that pop up. So before we start checking in, so we get discharged and
Good.
so if anything we notify the board that's
Good.
and then we see if we can do that in the
Yeah, good. Okay, good. So administrative guidelines or policy and procedure would be the next step. And what I gave you was administrative guidelines, and they were just ones that we thought about and we talked about. I didn't give you an actual policy. So if you see them, it should say reentry meeting, administrative guidelines. We did not put a policy or a procedure in place. We just did an administrative guidelines for the high school. And our administrative guidelines were very simple. They just, whoever was going to be made aware would then contact the parent. For suicidal ideations, we had something pretty well in place. So that one was not our big one. Our big one was kids that maybe over the weekend had something happen and went into placement over the weekend, or during the school week had something happen at night or off school properties, and then finding out, a week or two later that they were actually in placement. That's why we got this started. The suicidal ideations kind of worked pretty easy. This one was a little bit harder for us. So we said as soon as the staff was made aware that the student was out of school, and we would love that staff to be the school counselor, but in some cases it could be someone else. But as soon as they were made aware that they were going to call home to the parent. So that was kind of our first step in it. find out what placement and where they were in, and explain what a reentry meeting was at that kind of time and place. And then the school counselor would confirm all of the relevant information with the parent over the phone. And usually then the school counselor would make the phone calls to the placement where the child is to talk about academics, but to also see about releases. So we ask when we make that initial contact if the parent and the child can sign a release with not only the academic placement person at the placement center, but also the therapist that the student is going to be working with, so that we can have a release signed with both. And that was very important because it was very easy for our school counselors to get an academic release signed so that schoolwork could go back and forth, but it wasn't as easy to get a release signed with a therapist. So really your school counselor explaining the benefits to that to the parent and making sure that that happens. And sometimes that doesn't always happen. So sometimes your parents won't always sign for the therapist. And then we have a sheet that the parent then tells us that they'll call back with the reentry date and meeting, and then we get that signed and put in place. Okay. We like for an administrator to be at a reentry meeting, for the student school counselor to be at a reentry meeting, for the school psychologist to be at a reentry meeting. If you have a school social worker, we do not, but the school social worker to be at the reentry meeting, and the SAP liaison. So those are ours that we like to be there.
Just to go back, you said the release to the therapist, which I think is a great idea for the therapist to have contact with the school counselor to monitor. What if the kid is over 14 and doesn't sign the release? Is it because it's in school that 14-year-old rule that no longer applies?
No, the student would still have to sign. We just ask the parents to do that. If they won't, they won't. Then we just don't get that contact with the therapist. Most of the times the parents will let us know when they're coming back and have the reentry meeting. Sometimes the parent nor the student will sign for the therapist to talk to the school. And if they don't, that's okay, then we'll work around it from there at the reentry meeting, and we'll get into what we talk about at the reentry meeting. But if we can get them to release and we plant that seed early, some of them will release and we'll have really good open dialogue with the therapist. But that doesn't always happen. You're right. There's some kids that don't want to sign it, and parents that don't want to sign it.
Maybe pretty common for these people here, but is it just could a student sign that release and then they can communicate with the agency in the district? About 14.
Yep, above 14, yep. But we don't always have cooperation in that way. And that's all right. There's ways to kind of talk about that when we get to the actual meeting part, but you don't always have kids that'll sign. What I have found that the first 2 and 3 and 3rd year, we didn't have nearly as many that signed, especially in the 1st and 2nd year. But then when it became almost like normal at our school to do these, and it was almost like secondhand, we had more and more people kind of buying into it. And parents would talk to other parents and say how the reentry went and how it was beneficial. And we had kids that talked to other kids. And then we had more of a buy-in as it goes on. And I think that'll happen anywhere. Once you've established something and they see that it's working, you'll get more and more buy-in as it goes along. That's what we found to happen.
I work at a partial hospitalization program as a primary clinician, and I was wondering, do any of the placements that you work with now, like we do school meetings first, and then we encourage the schools to meet like as teachers, and like if those releases are signed once the kid comes back during their like transition day to meet with the kid. Do you do anything like that?
We do that very well with our drug and alcohol treatment center that's in Berks County. So Karen is really good at that. They'll actually have the discharge summary meetings at our school with a discharge therapist from the inpatient facility and SAP and everybody else and the parent, and the meetings are incredible. We haven't had that good of a response from our mental health placement centers. So we're working on it. But we definitely haven't had that great of a success.
Because on the other side, when I'm working with kids, what I see is they're often really nervous about approaching their teachers, so getting teachers involved, if the child is willing, is really important. It brings them together in a meeting before they even go to their classes.
And we do that, we'll talk about that in the reentry meeting, but we haven't had that great of a connection with our mental health placements to get them to actually have meetings before or after at our buildings. So we haven't had that good. When you guys said back there that you actually have something with your mental health facilities, that's incredible. We have not had that good of a relationship as of yet.
That doesn't mean that we're getting out of that.
Yeah.
Specific concerns,
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
as part of
Oh, okay, I misunderstood you. I thought you had more of that. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay.
Depends on the facility and if there's, certain social worker or therapist we've worked with a lot in the past. That helps us with that avenue of having open communication once we release the first time. Sometimes.
It's not. Yeah. Yep, it can. And that's what I was going to say. That can definitely take place. Yep. So you get all those contacts, you get the releases that you can get, and then you find out when they're going to come back. And for some students, that could be, that could really be like 3 days. That could be a week, 2 weeks, 14 days. For a drug and alcohol placement, some of them can be 2 weeks. A lot of ours at Karen are 28 days, so they could be out for a longer amount of time. So it could be whatever it is, and you get that meeting, and then you get it on the books. I like for reentry meetings to be first thing in the morning. So wherever that can fall, that's like the best time. So before, if it can happen at like 7 a.m. before school even starts for the day, that's great. Or if it can happen right at 7:30. But first thing in the morning is the best time to get a student in there. That's worked the best for us. Also, what's worked the best for us is if you can plan it on like a Thursday. So they have the reentry meeting on Thursday. They might have a Friday of classes, see how it goes, and a little bit of a break over the weekend, and then back on Monday. So sometimes giving them like a day or two in there and then a break is really nice. Now that, again, that's like the wish, but that doesn't happen. Obviously, you plan them when you can plan them, so that doesn't happen with all of them. Okay, so check out the next one, which is kind of the same thing as administrative guidelines, but it's the reentry meeting directions and checklists. So this is what we use prior to the meeting. This is kind of like our checklist to say, did we confirm everything? Did we obtain placement information? Did we contact the parent? Did we coordinate? And then who should all be there? And kind of we check it all off. This is really nice. This is what all of us have. Now, we've added stuff to this over time. We've changed it around, but this kind of keeps everybody on track and in the same place. And then this has how long they've been in placement, when they're returning, the date and time, and this usually ends up going in the student assistance folder. So in the SAP file, not in their actual educational records, but in the SAP file. And then you have the student questions and checklists for reentry. And that's the last page you have. This one is what we do at the meeting. So we have the meeting, they all come in. If we have a discharge summary or something from the therapist coming in, then we're going to sit down and we're going to discuss the discharge summary in detail at this meeting. But a lot of times we don't have the discharge summary, or we don't have all of the discharge summary. What's been happening a lot is that we have pieces of the discharge summary when the students come back, but we don't have all of them. So sometimes we don't have where it tells what they've been diagnosed with, or we don't have what the medication is that they're on. Those are usually the two big ones that are missing when they come back in. So but a lot of times we can get that information from talking. We usually start off with like welcoming them, telling them how happy we are to see them back, asking them about how it went at the facility, giving them a little bit of time, the student, to like tell us what their experience was like, how they feel, really making them feel like it's, we're really glad to see them back here, which we are very glad to see them back here. And then a lot of students at that point in time, at least as far as I'm concerned, usually want to know about academics. So the sooner that we can get kind of the academic elephant out of the room, as I call it, the better off we are. So this is sometimes when I have the teachers come down. So sometimes at this point, the teachers come down one by one. And they'll come in, and usually what we have with them is a list of everything that has happened in their class, test, quiz, homework, while the student has been gone. And on that piece of paper, that we ask the teachers to highlight what they don't need to make up and what they do need to make up, and when they need to make some of those things up. So give us dates and weeks. When would you like to see it done by? Okay? And so we'll have them sit down one-on-one with the teacher, parents still there, all of us still there, and we'll go over what they have to do in each class. I feel like that when that is done and when they see that, oh my gosh, I don't have to make up 5 tests tomorrow, or all my work doesn't need to be done, or this was no counted and I don't even have to make this up. I find that when that is kind of done, we can really get into the meat of the reentry meeting. But until we get that done, that sometimes is it's just lingering, and you can see the stress on the kid's face. So if you can get that done first, I would get that out of the way first. Most teachers can get coverage for 5 to 10 minutes of their class, so they can come down if they don't have their prep period in the beginning of the day. Okay. Any questions on that?
Do you have a suggestion of what that first day
We recommend that the first day is you stay in guidance. So for us, our kids stay down in the school counseling office for the first day. They have their Chromebook, their laptops there, they have the printer there, they have all of their sheets of what needs to be made up, what doesn't need to be made up, and we have them stay down there and kind of work on things and check in with us throughout the day, with the SAP liaison or with their school counselor throughout the day. So we really encourage that. We do have some kids that say, I really want to go to art class, or I really want to go to gym, or I would love to go to lunch and see people. And so we're flexible with it. We don't say that they have to stay down there, but we do say that usually the first day, if you can be down there and working on things, it just seems to go smoother. So we have kids that kind of play it by ear. I've never had anybody in the last 3 years that have gone out for every single class, like came in for the reentry meeting and then went right back into their full schedule. I haven't had anybody that has done that. A lot of them just can't make it through that full of a day after coming out of being somewhere for 2 weeks where they didn't have that kind of schedule. So we haven't had anybody that has done a full day, but we have had a lot that have said, I'm going to go down to lunch, or I'm going to try the lab portion of the science class. I have a lot that'll do that. Or I'm going to go down and just check in and say hi to the art teacher, and maybe I'll stay. So we're very flexible the first day, but a lot of them are down in the school counseling office. Any other questions on that? So then we get more into kind of after the teachers leave and we have all the academic stuff kind of taken care of, then we kind of go back into what else needs to be done. Sometimes our school psychologists will come in just during that academic piece and talk to them about 504s, they'll talk to them about IEPs, they'll talk to them about being evaluated with the parent there and all of that good stuff. And sometimes he'll wait and come in during the actual meeting after the academic teachers have left. So it's really up to you guys when and how you want them to come in, but I do very much suggest that if it is a student that does not have an IEP or is not special ed, that you have the school psychologist come in for a portion of the meeting so that they can talk to the student and the parent and they can explain what special education is and what would be the reasoning for possibly having an evaluation done, and if they want them to send the parent contact and information, parent permission information. So that's just something to keep on the back burner. Where you bring him or her in is completely up to you. Okay? We usually start after the academics are done with what do you think is going to be the biggest hurdle coming back? So what do you think is going to be a hurdle? Who do you think is going to be a hurdle? Are there kids that are going to be a hurdle? Are there teachers that are going to be a hurdle? Areas of the building that are going to be hurdles for you? Can you identify any of them? What could possibly trigger you or make you want to maybe come back down to guidance or to need to talk? And so we kind of lay all those out. Okay. And we write them down.
How different does this look for elementary?
We have not done it with our elementary students yet. So I would think it would be a lot different at that stage of the game, but yeah, more parent driven, but we haven't attempted reentry meetings at our elementary level yet. We've done them as far down as our 5th and 6th grade building, but we haven't gone down to our K through 4 buildings yet.
I work with a school that has Ryan kids meetings right now.
Okay. I would say it would be more parent driven at that point.
I have a extraordinary, now in the partial implementation. We, school psychologist, and that's a social worker position.
Oh, good.
We had extensive, we were involved in a phone conference meeting with the inpatient hospital. They laid out the plan of what they felt was gonna happen. They were trying to get him into the partial program so he wasn't inpatient as long as he was engaged, and looking at any of the trauma effects of, being away from mom. Doing that, partial, and we will be doing the reentry for him then, to come back to school.
And will it be more parent,
It'll be much
more parent driven?
5 years.
Yeah.
And we have all the information, we'll have the information about the inpatient and partial, and then have our team assembled, which will, be exactly what you mentioned.
But just at the elementary level.
But it's supposed to be on the level, and we only have one class, so,
Oh.
it's also, we're looking for him, it's a shorter amount of time for the day, so,
Yeah.
like we got, for us, that's gonna work in our favor.
Yeah, it definitely will.
I think too, when you're not in the team, not everybody knows.
Make it. Mm-hmm.
Upper levels want what we decide,
There you go.
that everyone is well.
And that's excellent. We do not have something like that yet. So that would definitely be something that would be a next step for us, and having it at each building as well. We don't have a team assembled at each building yet. So that would definitely be, that's a great idea. And is your Google Drive password secured so that not every teacher can see, just the people that are into that? You have it all like set up that way? Okay. Involved in that team. That's good. So we go to we have the meeting, we look at all the triggers, all of everything that's going on, what hurdles are going to be there, what triggers are going to be there, and then we decide what can we help with. So there's some things that we can, like, I don't want to say cannot change, but like sometimes it's hard for us to change if there's a certain kid or a certain person and they're in, say, 3 out of the child's 7 classes. It could be hard to move everything around in the schedule or get something else. So you have to sometimes become creative with what else can we do besides maybe changing a schedule. So you know, we look at all options. We are fortunate that we have a supported cyber school that's connected to our building. So like some of the kids will opt, if we can't change the schedule, to end up just taking that class online, but during the school day, down in the guidance office, because we can't rearrange everything. We have peer mediation, so we'll maybe sometimes say, could we maybe do or work on something with you and that other student so that we can get through the classes for the rest of the school year? That might not be an option, but we'll look at that. So we try to get as creative as possible on how we can accommodate the hurdles that are there. And I think you guys need to just realize that you're never going to accommodate every hurdle, and that's okay. I mean, the fact that you're having the meeting and that you're trying to accommodate as much as you can is better than nothing at all. So you're not always going to be able to accommodate every hurdle there. After we get through the hurdles and how we can accommodate and how we can help in the school meeting, then we really look at the discharge summary. Now, or lack of discharge summary if there's no discharge summary there. We have found that even our parents and students that come back with a discharge summary that is excellent, like down to this is the agency we want you to call and here's the address and phone number and all that stuff on there, they still have usually not done anything with the discharge summary when they get into the reentry meeting. So that this is where our SAP liaison, which is myself, in other schools, it would probably be the school social worker would help, but this is where I really sit down and we go through that discharge summary with pretty much everybody there, and we say, okay, have you called? It says here that they really wanted you to have a counseling appointment set up for a week from now. Is that set up? It's usually a no. Okay, do you have your insurance card with you? Yes. Let's sit down. Let's make some phone calls right here and now. You know, if a problem comes up with the insurance, which sometimes it does, that the agency that they put on there doesn't take their insurance card, or the agency that they put on there, the insurance card has an outrageous copay to it, and the parent's like, I can't afford that copay. Or we find out that it's medical assistance or certain forms of CHIPs, and we can provide the counseling with our school-based in the building. So like all those things we usually work out or hash out during that meeting, so that if it's an insurance question, an insurance problem, well, we can recommend maybe another one right there and then and call them, so that they're not going home and having to look up other agencies on their own or find other places on their own. We try to do that all with them because it's overwhelming. All of it's overwhelming. The fact that their child was in a placement, the fact that their child's now out, and where are the next steps, all of that is overwhelming. So we try to really help with all of that. So when they're walking out there, they have when their next appointment is. They have contact, they have confirmation, and they have an appointment set up and how they're going to get there. So we really dive into the discharge summary after we're done. A lot of it is the next steps with counseling. We also look at if the child has an IEP, are they signed up for secondary medical assistance, which a lot of our kids do not have secondary medical insurance. They have their parents' private insurance, but through an IEP, you can have a secondary of medical insurance, medical assistance, and a lot of our families don't even know that or have that, and so we put them in contact with Service Access Management in Berks County to get them hooked up with a case manager that will help them with the medical assistance forms online. We also have Service Access Management for Berks County. We have Service Access Management come into our building 3 times a year for 2 days in a row. They sit in the office and I set up case management intakes and medical assistance intakes for our families, so that if they need help with medical assistance, the SAM caseworker will do it with them right there online. If they need to scan documents in, they can use the school's scanner. If they need to fax stuff, they can use the school's fax. And it's just really helpful. So we always include that in our reentry meeting to make sure that that kind of is all taken care of as well.
What's the benefits of secondary medical assistance?
Usually copays. I mean, for some families, their copay can be $30 to $60 a session. And if they are doing the drop down from a partial, especially for drug and alcohol, that's a 3-time-a-week outpatient counseling. So 3 times a week, they're paying $60. Well, if you have a medical assistance as a secondary, the medical assistance will pick up a lot of times the copay.
It's also really helpful with medications as well.
There you go.
If you have a medical assistance card, most times the majority of your medications are in whereas some people, families with their regular commercial insurance are still looking at high
Now, the only disadvantage that I've run into is that, at least for us, our school-based mental health provider only takes medical assistance. So if you have a secondary of a private, you can't see our school-based mental health provider. Now, that's not everywhere. That's just our provider. There's other providers that work, but the one that we have, that's the only downfall that we've had. But other agencies that are school-based mental health, they take all different insurances. We just don't have one that does that. So, were you going to say something? No, okay. So we'll go over all that. We'll also, and it's the same with drug and alcohol, we'll go all over all that. Where are they at? Who are they with? We also, at that point, remind them and encourage them to sign a release when they go to the outpatient counselor as well, because it's always good for the school counselor to have some contact with the outpatient therapist, so that if something is going on, and this is the way we explain it, if something is going on at school, and maybe it went on a Monday, and we processed a little bit with the student, but now their counseling appointment for that week isn't until Thursday. And they don't really remember the thing that happened on Monday, but it could come up again. We'll say maybe it might be a good idea at that point, if there's a release signed, that the school counselor and the student can give that therapist a phone call on that Monday and say, hey, we worked through this, but we might need to work on this a little bit more on Thursday. Okay? Or for the school for the outside counselor to be able to say, hey, we processed this in our therapy session, but I think something might come up at school, and give the school counselor the heads up. So we really push and show them the benefits to signing a release for the school district, for the school counselor. Again, that doesn't always happen. If your liaison works for the agency that you're using, so in my case, I work for Karen, so if someone's coming out of Karen, there's already communication that I can receive. Now, I can't share it with the school, but I can talk more openly with the therapist that they're seeing at Karen. But that doesn't always work, that your liaison is connected with the agency that the kid is coming from. And then finally, we end with a lot of medications. So, did medication change? Were they on medication before they came in, before they went into the placement? Did that medication while they were there change? Did they come off of it? Are they taking it in the morning before school? Do they need to possibly take it at school in the morning? And then the nurse is there for those kind of cases too. Like, how does that have to happen? What forms need to be filled out? What does the nurse need to know? Are there any side effects that we could be seeing throughout the day now that they're on new medication, or the medication has been upped in some way? So we talk about all the medication guidelines and rules and regulations for that, and how they're taking it. And then we end with, how are we going to follow up? So what's that going to look like for follow-up at school? Do you want a daily check-in to start? And some kids do. Do you want that daily check-in with the school counselor, with the SAP liaison, with the school social worker? Who do you want that check-in to be with? And is that person that you want it to be with available and also okay with the check-ins? How often do you want the check-ins? Do you want it daily for the first week and then maybe taper off to once or twice a week? How do you want those to look? Okay. We also look at anytime passes. We call them anytime passes, but we give them basically a pass that says that at any moment during the day they can show that to their teacher and come right down to guidance. And we let them usually have those. We put a time frame on the anytime pass that we agree upon, and then we're going to kind of reassess it, in maybe 4 weeks or 2 weeks, however long we put on there. We just how the follow-up in general is going to be, who it's going to be. And then we end the meeting. Some meetings can take a half an hour, 45 minutes. Some meetings, one can take an hour to an hour and a half. There's a lot more questions. There's a lot more time. They don't have appointments set up. They really need help, or insurance isn't taken at this one, and we need to do some research. All kinds of stuff, so it could take even longer. So we usually block out an hour for a reentry meeting. So it's usually the first thing in the morning from like 7:30 to 8:30 or 7 to 8 that we block out. And we make it flexible. We usually have key people that are always there, but like the school psychologist might come in and out, the teachers come in and out, school nurse might come in, might not need to come in at all. But usually the school counselor, the SAP liaison, in our case, the SAP liaison, and an administrator, the school counselor and the SAP liaison are always in. The administrator is usually in for the majority of the time in our building.
When you say SAP liaison, that's what SAP team, is it your mental health?
It's our mental health and drug and alcohol liaison. At our facility, it's our contracted liaison that does our assessments.
Are they through school all the time? Or you can bring them in?
I'm at Exeter 4 days a week. So yeah, so I'm there. I'm pretty flexible with my time that I'm there. And then we have somebody that's at the other buildings multiple days. So if there is a reentry meeting at the junior high or at the 5-6 building and it's not on a day that the other ones are there, then I'll travel down and do the reentry meetings. So that's why I said if you don't have a SAP liaison that's contracted like that, and there's a lot of school districts that don't, then that's where like your school, if you have a school social worker, or if your liaison is able to like fly in and out for certain meetings as long as they're given enough time. There is a benefit to having a SAP liaison there, obviously, but it's not always feasible for all the different buildings. Well, that's kind of reentry meetings for us in a nutshell. We started this year to do them for 10-day out-of-school suspensions and alternative ed placements. So we just started that this school year. We felt like we had gotten pretty good at the drug and alcohol and the mental health placements, and so this year for 10-day out-of-school suspensions and for 45-day alt ed placements, we're now doing reentry meetings for them. They look obviously a little bit different. I'm not necessarily at all of the 10-day out-of-school suspension ones or the alt ed, but if the alt ed placement was due to drugs or alcohol, then I'm usually there. If the 10-day out-of-school suspension, we just recently had a big fight at the school, and we're bringing the 6 individuals that were involved back after being out for 10 days. And so I am going to be there because we're doing safety plans and what their schedules are going to look like, where they're going to be allowed to be in the building. Some groups, some psychoeducational groups that we're making mandatory for them to participate in, and we really need to figure out their movement in and out of school. So I was asked to be in those, but I'm not always in those either. So, but we just started doing those recently, and I see the benefit to having them in place now, but that's something that we just recently started.
Do you have a checklist for what parent guardian needs at the reentry meeting? On the administrative guidelines, it's like the very list bottom that talks about that.
I do, but I don't have it on here. I'll put it up on the website. I have one that's like a little checklist for them to take back with them that we get emailed to them. I'll put it up on the POSAP website for you.
So like, group of people for that reentry, or like
It's been different.
playing house?
Yeah, so it's been a little bit different. So, the administrator is always at those, obviously. At some of those, juvenile probation has been at. At some of those, they've actually had, a police officer be at them. School social worker if you have it, school psychologist depending, school nurse depending, SAP depending, school counselor always, so their school counselor. So it's just a little bit different in that sense. Usually in those, the administration and the school counselor are definites. And then it's kind of whoever they pull in. So there's been some 10 days out of school that I haven't been invited to that it really fits kind of in no way, shape, or form with student assistance, my role. But then there's been some that I was like, oh, you want me to come? And I wouldn't have even thought of it, but it was like a truancy or like a safety plan, or they really wanted, I did some peer mediation with a group, or I did, I'm going to be doing an anger management group with the group coming in. They're not very friendly with each other. So,
And like for like a policy violation, so, you know, if the kid's coming back from a suspension for that, if you're there, then you can.
offer
already
supports.
do that drug and alcohol piece.
Now, what we've tried to do with our alt ed placements and with our 10-day out of schools, if they were anything with a policy violation with drugs or alcohol, we actually have that, as soon as that parent comes in to get that, get their student for the policy violation, we have a permission slip for a SAP assessment, a behavioral health assessment to happen right then and there. Our principals get that signed and get a day and time for a parent meeting right away. So I don't even have to like set it up. They'll just say, hey, on Wednesday, will you be home, you know, or be able to bring him or her over here to the school, your student, and Alicia will see them and she'll want to meet with you after the assessment's over. Can you block out a 2 to 3 hour span on this day? And they'll set it up for me right away. So we try to do those before we even have the reentry meeting, or so that we can give recommendations at the reentry meeting, or have things already set up that we're going to do. It makes my job a lot easier if I can do it that way.
One thing I've noticed in learning as an administrator is that my teachers are very uncomfortable when the student comes back. And perhaps that's hard on us as an admin, not giving them the training that they need to deal. So I know a lot of them have a lot of apprehension with, you know, that they don't want to say the wrong thing, they don't want to do the wrong thing. Has anyone ever thought about putting together a prescription sheet or, you know, a list of suggestions or even a pamphlet on you know, what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do?
Well, I think if you have the time and you know that they're out and when they're coming back, I think that's something really great for your school counselor or your school social worker to sit down, or even over email with that kid's teachers. This is when they're coming back. This is, you know, some things that you might want to look for. These are some things that might be stressors, and giving them kind of that feedback before they even get back. And then a lot of times that day of the reentry meeting when they come down, sometimes it's almost a relief for the teacher because they can sit there and talk to them for a little while. And even though you're just coming in to do the academics, a lot of the teachers engage and start talking while they're in there, and it really lightens then like the stress of them coming back into the classroom.
That has a great resource.
Oh, good.
Mental health guidelines for it. It's a one pager, could run some of those kind of like how to respond, what to say. Maybe you should do that.
SAMHSA.
As a mental health, use it a lot for that. They have a lot of substance abuse, mental health. So SA and
AJ.
Mhm.
Huh? I have it on my brain now.
And if you get while the child's out or while the parent's out, some parents will say to you, my student would really like you to email the teachers, or we would really like you to email the teachers this. If we get permission from the student to share a little bit more or to share some of their stressors beforehand, we'll do that with the teachers as well. I think the problem is that before, we didn't have any notice that they were coming back. So it caused a lot of stress when they all of a sudden showed up. But now with this process, if you can get it going, that stress isn't there because they actually know when things are happening and when people are coming back. And it's not a lot of like, oh my gosh, they just showed up in my room and I have no idea where they've been or what's been going on. Any other questions? That's all I got for you. You got 5 minutes. But thank you. There's more forms, so if you want more of these forms, you can take them. But I will definitely put them up on the POSAP website.